How's it going, everybody? PK Investing here. QYLD is the gift that keeps on giving. But like everything, that gift is getting taxed. And many investors want to know how. In today's video, I'll be diving into taxes and QYLD's dividend, and finally figuring out how the ETF classifies its distribution. But before that, I want to let you know that I've made a few other videos regarding QYLD. The most recent one discussing the risks involved with the income ETF. That video can be treated as a supplement to this one, so I recommend you watch it if you haven't already. Alright, let's get into it. Before we determine how our dividends from QYLD are taxed, we need to understand how dividends in general are taxed. For all my fellow American viewers, our government puts dividends into 3 categories and taxes them accordingly. In that sense, not every dividend is created equal. Let's find out why. The first type of dividend is called a qualified dividend. This is a tax-efficient dividend, meaning it has the potential to be taxed at a lower rate than other things. And sometimes it isn't taxed at all. There are a few requirements a dividend must meet in order to become qualified. The first requirement is that the company that pays the dividend must be incorporated in the United States. The second requirement is that you need to have held your shares for at least 60 days. There are several details and quote-unquote fine print, but put simply, those are the overall requirements. A qualified dividend is taxed at the long-term capital gains rate, which has the potential to vary depending on changes to the tax code. Investors should also note that dividends from real estate investment trusts and master and limited partnerships can never be qualified. That brings us to the second type of dividend, which is called an ordinary dividend. It's called an ordinary dividend because it's taxed just like your ordinary income would be. That is basically the company you own paying you just like your regular job is paying you. This is the same thing as the short-term capital gains rate, and it varies from investor to investor depending on which tax bracket that investor is in. Now that we know how those dividends are taxed, we can finally discuss the third type of dividend. In this case, I use the term dividend loosely, because while many call it a dividend, it's more of a distribution, and you'll see what I mean very shortly. Of course, I'm referring to the infamous capital dividend, or more commonly, the distribution classified as return of capital. Return of capital is just that. The company you invested in is returning the capital you invested back to you. This is different from a regular dividend. A regular dividend is paid from a company's earnings, but a return of capital distribution is paid using the money that was invested in the company. This can have a few implications, and they vary according to case. For example, if a corporation decides to classify a dividend as return of capital, then there's a chance that the corporation just isn't making enough money to afford paying an actual dividend. But the case involving QYLD is a bit different. If you've watched all my previous QYLD videos, then you've come to understand that QYLD is an income ETF. That means their primary goal is to generate consistent, reliable income. As it turns out, taxes generally eat into your income, and QYLD has found a way to buffer or delay that. And it's due to the fact that return of capital, when able to be utilized, is taxed at a whopping 0%. That's right, you don't pay taxes on return of capital. And it makes sense. You already pay taxes on the money you earned, so there's no reason to be taxed on it when it's returned to you. But like everything involving investing, there's always more beneath the surface. And if something is too good to be true, then it usually is. You see, return of capital does sound great, but it isn't infinite. Eventually, all your capital will be returned to you. This is tracked by your cost basis. Every time you receive a capital dividend, your total cost basis decreases. And this makes sense because your total cost basis is how much money you invested in the company. But what happens when your cost basis reaches zero? Well, at that point, any capital dividends from that company turn into ordinary dividends, and they become taxed at your normal income tax rate. One thing to remember is that the amount of shares you own does not go down. Your cost basis can go to zero, but you still own all your shares. On paper, it'll look like you paid $0 for your shares, and I think that's actually kind of funny to think about. So to summarize, qualified dividends are given good tax treatment and taxed as long-term investments. Ordinary dividends are taxed like normal work paychecks, and capital dividends are not taxed initially, but once the cost basis has been depleted, they become taxed like ordinary dividends, but you will always keep your shares. Alright, now that we understand how dividends are taxed, we can take a look at QYLD distributions and see what's going on. In particular, I want to take a look at their Form 8937. I'll include a link to the entire document in the description below. The key thing I want to look at here are the last two columns, the percent return and the amount. Essentially, for the whole year, QYLD has classified its distributions as return of capital. That means every penny that came out of QYLD came from your own initial investment in the company, reducing your total cost basis, but making it so that you don't have to pay taxes on it. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Well, that's for each individual to decide. Personally, I like it. As long as QYLD's net asset value continues to increase, which it almost always will, I don't mind getting tax-free income. Now, there are ways to get around the ordinary dividend tax rate after your cost basis reaches zero, and I would like to go over those methods in a future video, so stay tuned for that. But for now, I'd like to wrap up by showing you my own QYLD position. I'm currently holding 531 shares of the income ETF, and that's bringing in about $123 each month. Most of that money is going right back into QYLD, taking advantage of their monthly payment schedule and increasing the effect of compounding. There was a lot of information in this video, and you might still have some questions. If you do, leave a comment down below. I'd love to have a discussion. And like I mentioned before, I've made a few other QYLD videos, so feel free to check those out. I'll leave a link to my QYLD playlist in the description. I plan to make more QYLD videos in the future, so subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that bell notification to be notified whenever I release a new video. Take care, and I hope to speak with you again real soon. I am not a financial advisor. Investing always involves risk. This video was created for entertainment purposes only.